Hey, it's Frank here with 4D Honeybee on a chilly, snowy Toronto day. It's minus 15 Celsius, which is about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. I highly doubt that we're going to see any activity at the entrances of this hive. We have seen bees at the upper entrances here with pretty chilly temperatures, but let's see if we see anything or hear anything right now. No, they're pretty balled up there. Nothing wrong with that. So, today's video, it's going to be a video that I've wanted to do for some time. It's going to be a top 5 things that second-year beekeepers should do. I was caught off guard in year number 2, and I'm going to tell you the number of reasons why. But this video is going to cover that, tell you how to prepare if you've overwintered bees successfully, because it's a very different story if you've overwintered bees and you've got active hives in the spring as compared to just starting hives in the spring. It's a totally different ball of wax, and I was not prepared for it. And I've also got this new toy. This GoPro was a gift for Christmas, and so I'm hoping one of the things I wanted to do this year with my videos was just a little better production and maybe some more angles and maybe some better close-ups with like a body camera. So now I'm able to do it. So I'm going to test this out and hope that you join me. And thank you for joining me at 4D Honeybee. Okay, so we're going to go over my top 5 things for the second-year beekeeper to do and to be prepared for. And the reason why this is an important video to me is because this is really my 3rd year that I've passed, heading into my 4th year of beekeeping. Year 1, I started off with 2 hives. I had 1 hive suffer badly right off the bat. Didn't look like it was even going to make it to the fall, never mind the winter. I had a second hive that was very strong. My first hive died in the early fall. My second hive died in the middle of fall, late fall, because of a mistake that I made. And so I had 2 years in a row where I started off with nukes. And then the 3rd year, as I was going into winter, I thought for some reason my hives were not going to survive again, but they did. All 3 hives made it into and through the winter. So I started off spring with 3 hives going at full bore in May. Here in Toronto, in Ontario, you know, the climate dictates seasonal bee coverage and seasonal beekeeping, right? So you have to do things differently in all seasons. So I really had never experienced going from fall to spring with my bees and with bees in general. And what it meant was that I got way behind the ball. And because of that, I had a hive swarm on me, and I just didn't have the resources or really even the plan in place to be ready to take care of 3 exploding hives. So you're going to be able to, because I'm going to tell you what to do. So maybe not in order of importance and always debatable, but here's my list from 5 to 1 on what I think you need to do right off the bat. So number 5, swarm prevention and control. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. First off, you need to make sure your bees have space. Always have space to keep building. Now, depending on how things happen in the spring in your climate, here in Canada last year we had a very prolonged, wet, nasty kind of winter into spring into summer, and so it put things way behind as far as bee production and such. But I found that my hives were going like crazy right in late April, early May. So I was behind the ball because I needed to have the resources in place to prevent the swarming. So 2 main ways that you can prevent swarming. The most important way is probably to always give bees space. They need space to expand in their hive. The other thing you can do as a kind of a fallback position is set up a swarm catcher. So a swarm catcher can be any kind of a box, any kind of a ready-made hive that is very close to the bees and conducive to having bees go into it if they decide to leave their own hive. So what I did was I set up a 5-frame nuke box. I put it in a tree only about 10-15 feet from my hive and about 6 feet off the ground. And I did see bees go in there. I had frames in it, I had drawn out comb in it, and I even put some honey in it. Another thing that you can do for an enhancement, although I don't know if it works or not, but it's what people say to do and I've done it, is put in some lemongrass oil. So lemongrass oil acts as an attractant. It's said that it delivers the same scent as the pheromones of a queen. And then my question was, well, if they have the scent of a queen, why would they want to go in the hive? And I guess the theory is that they have the scent of a queen previously being there. So I always set up my swarm box that way as a fallback. Now, I did have a swarm this year, even though my swarm box was there, because I wasn't prepared for it. So number 5, swarm prevention, swarm control, swarm retention. That's an important thing. Number 4, test for mites. Depending on your neck of the woods, up here in Ontario, varroa is a pretty major factor. And I treat for them twice a year. I treat in the fall and I treat in the spring. Because those, in the fall, obviously you want the hive to be as strong as possible going into a weakened state, which the winter is. And then in the spring, they're in that sort of tail end of the weakened state. It's not a weekend state. It could be. They're kind of still weak, so you don't want varroa to hit them again. So what I did this year was I tested for mites for the first time with this product. And this is just what I used because it was what my local bee supplier had. But you can use anything. Basically, it's a way to collect a certain number of bees, to be able to count the number of bees that you have in here, and to knock the mites off with some kind of a solution that instantly kills the bees and the mites. And then you shake it around, separating the mites from the bees, and then you're able to easily count the mites at the bottom here. And I was pretty surprised. My mite counts were fairly low, but the fact is it was my first time doing a mite count, so I really didn't have anything to compare it to, right? I do have a video about that. I ended up treating for mites, and I had a pretty good mite drop in the fall, so I suspect I'll do it again in the spring, simply because it gives me a base to work with going forward, right? I will know comparatively what a high mite count is for my hives in my area and what a decent mite count might be. So treating for mites, I use 2 forms. There are many more forms that you can use, but I use Mite Away quick strips, primarily because they're a fairly quick treatment. It's a fume-based treatment, so you put these pads, if you will, into the hive between a certain temperature, and that temperature causes the pads to emit fumes which kill the mites. And it's a fairly short treatment. I think it's a 10-day treatment. I'm not sure. It's somewhere around that. But I also use Apivar strips. Apivar strips are different types of strips that you put in the hive. You keep there for between 40 and 50 days. And those strips work on transmission. So the bees have to walk on it. They transmit the chemicals with their feet. And so it takes a lot longer to get full hive coverage, or 100%, a quote-unquote 100% coverage of your hive. So depending on, I never like to put any kind of chemicals in when I'm planning to extract honey from the hives. So depending on what you've got going as far as honey, you might use either ways. Of course, there are other ways that are very effective, like fumes and oxalic acid, which can be blown right into the hives, and they work just as well. So these are the 2 methods that I use because they're relatively easy, and for a beginner beekeeper, you want to try to keep things simple. So test and treat for mites, number 4 on your hit list. Now this next thing kind of relates to everything, but it's really important. It might even be the number 1 thing that you have to do for your bees. Resources. And by resources, I mean everything. I'm going to show you a little video in my garage to show you how I'm planning to be ready for spring this year, because I was so unprepared last year. And there are a lot of things you need to plan for. First of all, number 5, if you want swarm control or prevention, you got to give them space. Well, you can only give your bees space by adding boxes and adding frames in your hive. So you got to have them. You've got to have them ready. Which means you got to go buy them. And if you wait too long in the spring, depending on where you are, and if you're buying them from a supplier, the supplier could run out. So it's something you want to plan for right now in the winter. And we'll go into a little more about planning near the end of the video, but resources is critical. If you want to test for mites, well, you got to have some way to test. And I'm showing you the logo here for no particular reason. I don't get paid for this. I don't get this free or anything. I bought this with my own money. I'm just showing you what worked for me. So back to resources. It can be everything from, if you're going to split your hives, you have to have a new hive to put it in. So you've got to have that. In my case, I use these pine pine hives, which a subscriber asked the thickness of the hive walls. They are 7/8 of an inch. I couldn't find your question, your comment. I may have erased it or something, but I couldn't find it in there to be able to reply. But they're 7/8 of an inch solid pine. These funky kind of joints, which I keep forgetting what they're called, but I love them. They're not dovetails, they're something else. If somebody could tell me that, that'd be great, because I always forget. And my dad's a carpenter. He used to be a carpenter. So, but I take these and I just finish them with a clear coat urethane type of finish, because I like that look. I like it to weather naturally. But you got to have the hives. You got to have the resources. You got to have the mite treatment stuff. You got to basically plan out what you're going to do with your hives, with your bees that have made it through the winter, and have most, if not all, the gear already in hand, because if you don't, it can become a real nightmare in the spring and you can get really behind the ball, just like I did. So number 3 is have resources. Make your boxes. Get your new hives ready. Get your swarm boxes ready. Get everything you need to be able to make sure these bees go the way you want to. Number 2 is feed or prepare to feed. So I try not to feed my bees in the spring. And the reason why I don't is I just do it hive to hive based on the resources that they have in their hives. So last year I fed one hive because it seemed to be in trouble. It had very little honey stores. They weren't building bees, they weren't making bees, they weren't drying out comb. So I fed it, and I fed it with the ratio of 1:1 sugar to water by mass. And so to do that, you have to have a feeder, right? So I've got feeders all standing by ready to go, but if you go to your hive and you discover that it needs emergency feeding, but you don't have a feeder or a plan to be able to feed it, then it can cause some problems, right? So decide if you're going to feed, or you should at least be prepared to feed a hive or some proportion of your hives so that they can make it through the spring. Because again, the bees can make it through the harshness of the winter. In March and April, you go and check them out and they seem like they're perfectly healthy and happy and ready to go, but then they die in March or April because they don't have enough nectar, they don't have enough pollen, they don't have enough resources to get through that last little hump where the weather is okay, and the weather's not what's killing them, but resources for bees is what's killing them. So number 2, be prepared to feed. Number 1, the most important thing, in my opinion, for second-year beekeepers, have a plan, prepare. Decide what you want to do with your hives. In my case, I mostly just want to make honey. Actually, there's two priorities that I have. One is making honey, because I want to have enough honey to be able to cook. I've replaced most of our sugar intake with honey now. I give honey to all my family's friends, co-workers, gifts, neighbors. But the second thing that I want to do is kind of perpetuate the health of the species, right? I don't completely buy into this theory that bees are going to be extinct anytime soon. But in North America, there's no doubt that we harm our bees with the use of pesticides and that type of thing. So, but I mean, they weren't a native species to North America either. So I do believe that part of my part in the whole bee ecology is to provide more bees into the ecosystem, right? So yeah, so that's my excuse for letting my swarm go this year, right? No, but seriously, I do believe that you have to have a plan for what you want to do with your bees. So I realized this year as well that my 3 hives quickly grew into 7 hives. And 7 hives is probably on the very, very cusp of the absolute max that I can do, that I can manage, right? And so next year, I'm only planning to have a maximum of 2 more hives. Right now I have 6. I have 5 in the country, I have 1 at home. I'd like to have 1 more hive in the country and 1 more hive at home, and then that's it. I'm maxed. And the reason why I'm maxed is because I just can't devote the time that's required to take care of these bees. You really shouldn't need to go into any given hive more than once a week. But there are times that you do. If you have queen issues, if you have other kinds of issues where you have out of the ordinary situations, and you pretty much always have them, you have to get to your bees more often than just once a week. There's a good chance that that's the case. If I have 7 hives, then technically I'm going to the bees every day, or taking an entire half day to go through all the hives, or that type of thing. So know your limits and work to your limits. And it becomes a lot more enjoyable as well. If your hives grow out of control, then you get a lot of swarming, you get a lot of robbing, you get a lot of things, your bees aren't happy, and you're not happy as a beekeeper. So have a plan. Do you want to produce honey? If so, plan your spring based on that. Do you want to produce more bees? If so, plan your spring according to that. If you want to rear queens, which I have no interest in doing yet, but I might soon, never know, then plan accordingly. But have a plan. Have a plan for when you take the wraps off or you get going in the spring. The bees start to multiply. It happens really fast. And if you're not ready for it, then you can lose a lot of bees, or you can lose your apiary entirely. So that's the most important thing. Prepare, have a plan, and then execute the plan to the best of your ability. Now, this is nature, right? So it doesn't always work according to your plan, but I think you have to have one. I think you have to have a plan. I have a plan every time I go to my hives. With each individual hive, I have a plan, right? Now, a lot of the times, it just doesn't go according to plan, but I think you've got to have the plan to make you a better beekeeper and keep you better organized. So that's it. The top 5. Number 5 was, looking at my list here, swarm control and prevention. Number 4, test and treat for mites. Number 5, make more boxes, have resources, be prepared for everything you're going to need as far as physical stuff. More hives, more boxes. Even if you're going to make honey and take honey, transporting frames of honey is the most difficult thing if you're not prepared for it. So you can bring out, a little plastic bucket and stick your beautiful capped honey frames in it, but then they lean against each other and get squished and honey pours all over the place, right? And or grass gets in there and it gets dirty. Like, the best way to transport frames of honey is with more boxes, with more brood boxes or honey supers. So you need extra, right? You even need extra boxes for things like feeding or for things like winter insulation and stuff like that. So be prepared. Number 4, test for mites. That's pretty self-explanatory. Number 3, make more boxes. Did I say that already? Yeah, I think I'm going over it again. Anyway, number 2, feed or prepare to feed. Make sure you're able to if your bees need it, or if you just want to do it, that's fine. And number 1, prepare and plan. Always be cognizant that the spring is totally different than buying a package or buying a nuke box. In the spring, the bees go on their own schedule, and if you're not ready for it, then you might pay for it. So I'm just going to quickly show you the supplies that I've got kicking around in my garage. And that's not all of them. I still have more boxes that I'm preparing to make over the winter into the spring. And then we'll wrap up this video. Okay, so here is most of what I've got. You can see over here I've got materials to build more boxes. I've got frames. I've got some wax that I'm going to render soon. I also keep, and I guess it's a bit of the hoarder in me, but I think these really come in useful. These are the nuke boxes that my nukes arrived in. I don't throw these away. They're this plastic, right? And they basically last forever. And you could use those for an emergency. If you need to create a little nuke box or a swarm box or something, you can always keep those in mind. Look at all the frames I've got too. Lots more frames, a couple of feeders. I actually probably have 3 or 4 more feeders. I have treatment for American foul brood. And I haven't used it yet, but it can be a problem in our region, so I'm ready to treat for that if I have to. Got a bunch of queen excluders, 1 for every hive. Got more boxes to be able to build more boxes. I've got enough materials to build 2 complete hives. And then look at all the frames I've got kicking around. Some old that need to be cleaned and then dressed and ready to go. And some brand new, you can see over here behind my very old bicycle, that are still strapped together and have not been used yet. So that's not quite everything that I've got, because I actually have more in the house ready to go. But that's what I think I'm going to need this year, going into now what is my 4th year. But really for this apiary, it's the 3rd year of having 6 hives. So that is a good idea of the material that I think I need to reach my goal, which is to make another 2 hives and to produce over a couple hundred pounds of honey. That's what I need to do to make sure that my bees are managed properly, make sure I do a good job as a beekeeper. Okay, so there you see, first of all, what a mess my garage is. But you see that I'm ready to build 2 complete hives. They're ready to go. I'm ready to build 1 extra box for each hive as well. Now, I already have 1 extra box for each hive, because right now that's what I'm using for winter insulation. I'm using either a medium or a deep on the top of every hive. But I always like to have one extra for every hive, just in case. So, and you saw how many frames I've got. It's ridiculous. Probably got enough frames to duplicate my entire apiary. But hives will eat frames in a hurry in the spring if you're wanting to expand them and wanting to prevent swarming. So make sure you have your products. Also be aware though that when you spend money on products like this or any other product, they could have shelf lives, right? So be aware of that, because I do believe that my Max quick strips expire this year. So if I don't use them all, then either I'll have to use them expired or decide not to use them, use another product. So that's what I have. That's how I'm ready to go for this year, in the hopes that I'll be a better beekeeper in year 4. So thanks for joining me with Frank at 4D Honeybee.